high alert for counterfeit checks being cashed with falsified IDs. Grocery owners, shopkeepers, and cashiers are urged to verify ID details carefully, especially for individuals claiming to be 69 years or older. The ministry has identified fake names and ID numbers tied to the scam and reported annual surges in fraudulent activity, particularly during the Christmas season. While security features were upgraded in 2021, fraudsters continue to exploit vulnerabilities. Businesses suspecting fraudulent checks are advised to contact the police or the ministry's investigation and compliance unit. The High Court has denied Trinidadian Sherlyn Guppy's application for habeas corpus, paving the way for his extradition to the United States on drug trafficking charges. Justice Ricky Rahim upheld the extradition magistrate's ruling, rejecting claims of entrapment and interference with family life. Guppy, arrested in September, is accused of conspiracy to distribute heroin and cocaine in Pennsylvania. Evidence includes intercepted communications, drug shipments, and testimony from a U.S. informant. Guppy argued extradition would harm his autistic son, but the court found no exceptional circumstances, noting the child resides with his mother in the U.S. and can access better care. Rahim emphasized the importance of honoring international extradition agreements, dismissing Guppy's claims of bad faith by U.S. authorities. Guppy remains in custody and also faces local firearm and narcotics charges. Police are investigating the murder of 68-year-old Bertram Greenaway, whose body was discovered with his throat slashed in his Marval home on Saturday morning. A woman delivering a mail around 8 a.m. found Greenaway lying in his living room in a pool of blood. She alerted authorities after noticing a previous mail left untouched since Friday. Officers believe Greenaway, who lived alone at Herrera Trace, Moncoco Road, may have been killed on Friday. No motive has been established and an autopsy is scheduled for this week. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for watching.
Once upon a time, in the town of Medford, there lived a man named Jack Frost.
Happy holidays! You guys are great!
Are all musicians really flaky?
Yeah.
He had a beautiful wife and a loving son, but his job kept him away from home.
I brought you this.
And your harmonicas?
I got that the morning you were born. And you play that no matter where I am. I can hear it.
Then one night, something happened. Something terrible.
It's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. I miss him too. I miss him too.
That turned into something wonderful.
I'm home. Charlie, it's me, it's Dad. What?
So I'm supposed to believe that you're my dad?
You were the one who played on the magic harmonica.
I thought you made that up.
So did I.
Let's hear the selected dance. Get up!
I don't think so.
Dad, it's the snowman.
Honey. Charlie's run away with the snowman. Really?
What's the snowman look like? 3 bowls, 2 stick arms?
Hey, that's my branch!
Stocky, well built.
Shredding! Whoa!
Hey, I slimmed down.
Whoa! Thanks for giving me a second chance to be your dad.
Warner Brothers is proud to present Michael Keaton
I'm a frozen freak of nature.
and Kelly Preston
Freeze, mister.
She's obviously not talking to me.
in the story of a man who got a second chance to be the world's coolest dad,
As long as you hold someone in your heart, you can never lose them.
Jack Frost.
WESN.
Hello there, and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capsule. I'm Keaton Shaw. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Yesterday, during an interview on AM Prime, we were receiving messages coming to us, updates suggesting that a government MP and minister unfortunately perished in a house fire along with 2 of her relatives, and that was during the course of yesterday's morning edition of AM Prime. Following the conclusion of AM Prime yesterday, received confirmation that a member of Parliament for Dabadi Omera, former mayor of the borough of Arima, and Minister in the Ministry of Education, Lisa Morris-Julian, was said minister who perished in a house fire along with 2 of her children at her Farquhar Street home in Arima. Ladies and gentlemen, I will tell you that that tragedy really has played on my mind since receiving such news yesterday. Seeing the photos, seeing all the news coming in, it always is very, very hurtful, and very it causes a lot of anguish when you see anyone and any one family having to face such very unfortunate, to say the least. It's a tragedy, and even now this morning, even though I thought about this in my head and thought about the words that I would say as I opened the program this morning, it's still very difficult to put together. Her husband is in the hospital up until late last evening. We understand that he did receive burns about his body, particularly his back. It seems to be in a bad condition, but updates will continue to come in. At this point, though, our thoughts, our prayers go out to the family of MP Lisa Morris-Julian, and of course to all her cabinet colleagues. That video that circulated yesterday of Camille Robinson Ritchie's Member of Parliament and Government Minister, that was heartbreaking. And any individual that has to face this or go through this, our heart goes out to them, our thoughts to them. May she rest in peace. And of course, we thank God for giving us MP Lisa Morris-Julian, and we are grateful for her service and all that she has done for Trinidad and Tobago. Ladies and gentlemen, as I said, as we get more news coming in, because an investigation is taking place, we will share that with you on AM Prime. But in the meantime, we do have to continue with this morning's edition of the program, and we are speaking about the status forces agreement between the United States and Trinidad and Tobago, which was first entered into, which was ratified in 2007. It was re-signed in 2013. The latest version actually was extended via diplomatic note in 2022. But just last week, Minister of National Security Fitzgerald Hines signed an agreement which comes into force from January 1st, 2025. This morning, I am joined by Mr. David Abdullah. He has become a voice. He has a platform here on AM Prime, but he has expressed some concerns in relation to this agreement. And we get into that conversation this morning with Mr. Abdullah. Good morning, sir. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Keaton, and to all of your viewers. Let me also publicly extend, I did put up a Facebook post somewhat belatedly yesterday evening. It should have gone up early yesterday morning because I also got the news very early yesterday morning. Extend condolences to the family members and friends and colleagues of Mrs. Lisa Morris Julian on the passing of both herself and two of her children in that tragic, very, very tragic fire yesterday. So fire is a horrific way to pass away. And, you know, a number of our citizens regrettably do die in fires. But when a mother and two children die, it does shake us. And especially, I suppose, somebody who is in the public domain and has given public service. It transcends politics. And therefore, this is a human issue, a matter of human tragedy, and therefore we require the human value of compassion and empathy at this point in time with the family of Mrs. Morris Julian. So I too extend condolences on behalf of the MSJ to the family, friends, and colleagues.
Indeed, Mr. Abdullah, and I also thank you for stressing that point that such tragedies transcend politics, and that is something that is very, very important to note as well in the context of the situation. But Mr. Abdullah, again, thank you very much for joining us on the program this morning as we speak about the Status Forces Agreement between the United States and Trinidad and Tobago. This particular agreement facilitates interoperability between the two countries' armed forces, but you have expressed concerns how this can affect our diplomatic relations with other nations, but also our sovereignty. If you can, just kindly explain your position on this agreement.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. And thanks for having me on the program this morning. Now, the first thing is that it wasn't just one agreement that was signed. It was, yes, the Status of Forces Agreement, or SOFA. There was also the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative Technical Assistance Field Team and the Acquisition and Cross-Servicing Agreement. And also, Trinidad and Tobago apparently has recently granted accession to the Treaty of San Jose, which I believe, I have to research that properly, may be the continuation of the Shipwrighter Agreement that was signed way back in 1995 by the Pandya administration. And then there's the Southcom Human Rights Initiative. So there were 5 agreements that were signed. Now, our position is that there needs to be cross-border agreements between sovereign states dealing with criminal issues, criminal matters, which are cross-border crimes and present tremendous challenges to any single country to deal with. And we therefore have no difficulty with the government entering into agreements with the United States and other foreign governments with respect to things like drug trafficking, arms, ammunition, explosives, and so on, and human trafficking and money laundering. And there are such agreements because we do have personnel here in Trinidad and Tobago from the US DA, Drug Enforcement Agency, from the US ATF, and others, no doubt, from other agencies, intelligence agencies that are operating here. So, and that's just the United States, and I'm sure that there's similar personnel from Canada, from Britain, from France, and so on. So we understand the need for that kind of collaboration to deal with crimes that one country cannot successfully address given the cross-border nature of those crimes. But that is very different from having military agreements, because when you're talking about criminal activities, that's law enforcement. When you're talking about the military is not about law enforcement. The military can support law enforcement agencies, just like the Defense Force, both Coast Guard and Air Guard and the Army and so on, will support the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service with respect to criminal activity here in Trinidad and Tobago. But when you have an external military force, they're not dealing now essentially with criminal activity in Trinidad and Tobago or cross-border crimes. And they may support their own national agencies, which would then interface with our national agencies. But when you have the military, because fundamentally the military is about securing their borders and pursuing their state's interest with respect to other countries and so on. So you have in this region very many military bases operated by the United States. There are many bases in Colombia, for example. There are bases in other parts of Central America. There's, of course, the infamous Guantanamo base in Cuba, which ought to have been given up, decades ago, but the United States is holding on to that base in Guantanamo. So the U.S. operates, and Puerto Rico is a colony. Let us never forget that Puerto Rico is a colony of the United States. So there are bases in Puerto Rico as well. So in this region, the U.S. has very many bases and operates these bases in furtherance of its perceived national interest, which has been defined more than 200 years ago in the Monroe Doctrine, which doctrine essentially says that whatever happens in this part of the world is that affects U.S. national security interests or U.S. interests. The U.S. then has a right to intervene in our internal affairs in pursuit of its interests. So our concern, first of all, is that while we understand that every state has its own interest, Trinidad and Tobago, we must define what our interest is. And in defining that interest, we must not lose sight of the fact that the U.S. is a colonial and imperial power. It's a colonial power because it has colonies in the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, and so on. And it is an imperialist power, as you see happening with the Middle East, with not only its support for Israel in genocide of Gaza, the United States refusal to accept the International Court of Justice or the International Criminal Court's jurisdiction in these matters. The U.S. supporting Israel bombing of Syria. Yes, after it would have facilitated the overthrow of Assad. So the U.S. is an imperialist power. It is engaged in globally at this point in time with a challenge, if you wish, or challenging for supremacy, hegemony, because it is being challenged, its global hegemony is being challenged by China in particular, by Russia to a lesser extent. And so it is asserting its so-called right under the Monroe Doctrine to ensure that this part of the world remains under its control. And we must therefore understand the re-signing of these agreements, because you're correct, they were first signed by, the SOFA was first signed by the Manning government. And there was an interesting commentary, and I haven't fact-checked it, so I don't want to say that is absolutely true. There was an interesting commentary by someone that was on social media, which indicated that the Manning government really entered into the SOFA because of the Summit of the Americas, which Trinidad and Tobago was to host in 2009. And therefore, the U.S. military required a certain presence here in Trinidad and Tobago to protect the U.S. president, President Obama, who came at that time. And then that got rolled over, but the Kamala Prasad-Dicesa government then extended the scope of the SOFA from 2007, 2009, when it signed on or renewed it in 2013. And the Rowley government apparently has further extended it in 2024. So, and those things ought to be fact-checked. So, the point I'm making is that in this period, 2024, the geopolitics of the world is very different to what it was in 2007, 2009, and 2013, where the United States clearly has an agenda to ensure its dominance of this region. Hence, continued and strengthened blockade against Cuba, sanctions against Venezuela, against Nicaragua, supporting right-wing attempts to overthrow the government of Colombia, government in Honduras, and so on. So there's a lot of geopolitics at this moment, and Trinidad and Tobago, therefore, ought to preserve our stance with respect to non-interference in the internal affairs of another country and respect for the sovereignty of other nations. And these agreements, in our view, are violating and have the potential to violate that position, which was, and somebody shared an interesting post with me, comment by Errol Barrow, former Prime Minister of Barbados, who then quoted Dr. Eric Williams about the importance of ensuring no military presence in our Caribbean, newly independent Caribbean states.
Mr. Abdullah, in the context of international relations, I do very much understand the point that you are making, but you also pointed out that this is not necessarily anything new. The Monroe Doctrine, for example, there's also the big stick policy on the part of Woodrow Wilson of the United States of America. And these are nothing that are necessarily new. And geopolitics and diplomatic relations are constantly evolving. But Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowling made that point last week at his briefing. He said, we are an independent nation that is free to dictate our own foreign policy. Furthermore, any activities on the part of the Department of Defense of the United States, such activities will be defined clearly, but only once Trinidad and Tobago gives permission in writing through diplomatic channels. One also has to question, is this not necessary for smaller nations and more vulnerable nations such as Trinidad and Tobago to have such support and to have such allies in respect to military strength?
Okay, so I heard what Dr. Rowley said, and he went on to say that Trinidad and Tobago, his government would not allow any external military force to be in Trinidad and Tobago and use Trinidad and Tobago as a staging point against a third country, right? Obviously, he was referring to Venezuela, given the headline that was in the Newsday on Friday, Thursday or Friday last. So, and while one could say we take him for his word on that, there was an important caveat to what he said, because he said his government would do it. Now, it therefore leaves it open. Would another government allow it? Another PNM government with a different leader? I don't know. Another party in power. So once you open the door, in other words, this sofa can be the thin edge of the wedge. I remember former Vice President of the Oil Field Workers Trade Union, John Abraham, who also died tragically on the highway in 1980. John Abraham used to say in negotiations that you have to get a foot in the door. In other words, if you want to get a new benefit like paternity leave, just for argument's sake, then if you get 2 days paternity leave, we may have wanted 5 or 6, but if you get 1 or 2 days, that is a foot in the door. The next round of negotiations, you push the door a little wider and get some more. So the difficulty that we have, and why we've objected to these agreements, is that Dr. Rowley might be right and say his government wouldn't allow Trinidad and Tobago to be used as a staging point. But what about another government? And then the issue is, who is going to interpret the agreement? So the Trinidad and Tobago government has an interpretation. The US government may have a completely different interpretation. You're coming into government in January, in a few weeks' time, Mr. Trump. We all know that Mr. Trump interprets truth very differently from many other people, right? And he labels truth fake news, yes? So we are this is why I'm making the point that 2009, the geopolitics is very different to today, where the contestation between major countries, United States, China, and United States, Russia, and so on, those contestations are very serious. People are talking about a third world war. Now, may or may not happen, but people are putting those things on the agenda. And therefore, we need to ensure that we don't do anything that will jeopardize our position, even as small states, to stand up for our sovereign rights and so on. enable a foreign power, because we don't have a SOFA, we don't have these agreements with China or with Russia. Yes? So if you want to balance it out, then we should have similar agreements and so on. There are no joint military exercises between Trinidad and Tobago or CARICOM countries and China and Russia, but there are joint military exercises between Trinidad and Tobago and CARICOM countries and the United States. So these are very serious considerations that we therefore draw the line as MSJ and say, yes, we need agreements. So we're not unrealistic, we're not wild in our statements, which is why we said, yes, we need agreements with respect to arms, ammunition trafficking, human trafficking, money laundering, drug trafficking, and we have to have collaboration in those areas, including having those countries' personnel here to collaborate with our security, our Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. But we draw a line with respect to military collaboration in that way, and you could have those elements of collaboration in terms of joint patrols of the Caribbean Sea. You could work those things out without all-encompassing agreements. U.S. naval ships come to Trinidad and Tobago. Some of them come ashore to paint a school or put on the roof of a community center. Okay, those things are fine. You could have temporary agreements for those things and so on. And we don't have a difficulty with those kinds of arrangements. But when you have a permanent agreement like this that enables military personnel now to bring in arms and so on, and it doesn't define, well, whether it's just a sidearm or whether it is heavy artillery. They could bring in telecommunications equipment and so on and so on and so on. Their personnel are immune from criminal prosecution in Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore, their military people will be subject to prosecution only within their armed services arrangement or in the United States courts. Now, so, we have horrible experiences of military personnel operating in another country and engaging in criminal activity against citizens, including things like rape and so on. So we have major concerns about these agreements and don't think that there should be military agreements. And these agreements were signed on the 10th of December, which is United Nations Human Rights Day. And really it was a travesty to sign those agreements on such a day. And the announcement of the agreements were not made by the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs or the Ministry of National Security or the Office of the Prime Minister. Why weren't they? These things affect Trinidad and Tobago, but the announcements were made by the U.S. Embassy. We learned about these things by the U.S. through the U.S. Embassy.
Mr. Abdullah, answer me this in respect to prosecution. How different is this from the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, which allows for embassies to sit on a sovereign soil, essentially? Ambassadors and members of the diplomatic corps of certain countries are immune from prosecution in another country. If that is the case, how different is this to the Vienna Convention of Diplomatic Relations? In this particular instance, of course, Department of Defense personnel are immune from prosecution in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, it is different because, of course, members of an embassy are civilians, and there is a reciprocity in that regard that, our civilian diplomats in the United States will similarly be immune from prosecution. So that is those things are internationally understood and agreed upon. Military people operate very differently from diplomats, yes, and persons in embassy. Now, I'm not saying that a person in an embassy cannot transgress the law, but military people operate very differently. They function differently, and even persons under UN peacekeeping forces, for example, who are military persons, have been known to have committed very gross crimes against civilians of the countries in which they operate. And so that is where these agreements seek to protect the U.S. But we're not going to have military personnel in the United States, except on a brief training visit or something like that. And on the other hand now, we have to remember the United States did not sign on to the International Criminal Court, which criminal court was the initiative of former Prime Minister, former President of Trinidad and Tobago, A.N.R. Robinson, he championed that. I think it became the Treaty of Rome, which established International Criminal Court. And it was Prime Minister Robinson who really championed that. US and Israel and some other big powers haven't signed on to that because they do not want their military personnel and other personnel to be tried before an international tribunal. Yes, they think they're bigger than that, and they know that their military people commit atrocious crimes, yes, while engaged in so-called armed conflict in other countries. But they don't want their military people to be subject to any kind of international tribunals. So we have to understand the nature of the US state in this regard as an imperial and colonial power. And that is why these agreements are wrong. Now, Prime Minister Rowley in his press conference notably deflected from discussing the content of these agreements. He said, as the Minister of National Security, the media has reached out to the Minister of National Security and he has not responded whatsoever. Now, that is an absolute lack of transparency and accountability by the government of Trinidad and Tobago to the citizens of this country with respect to decisions that the government took supposedly on behalf of us, but for which we don't know the implications in full. Now, the Prime Minister can't say, ask the Minister of National Security. The Prime Minister is the head of the government. He was present at the signing. And he's chairman of the National Security Council. This matter apparently went to Cabinet for Cabinet to approve it because a minister wouldn't be able to sign an international agreement without the approval of Cabinet. So the Prime Minister is the chairman of Cabinet. So the Prime Minister can't deflect on this. And when he deflects on it and doesn't answer questions, all that does is to raise more speculation and confusion in the minds of citizens that there's more in the mortar than the pestle. If the government had come out before the US Embassy and made a statement on what had been signed, if the government, when asked on the matter, the Prime Minister was able to provide some information about what these agreements contain without necessarily, providing every single clause of the agreement, but essentially summarizing what the agreements contain and what the benefits are and what are some of the risks and why these were signed at this point in time and what are the rights of the government and people of Trinidad and Tobago in this regard, then perhaps we would have been less concerned, let me use a polite term, right? Less concerned about it. But given all of this, given the fact that there's no transparency, there's no accountability, there's simply been deflection and bluster by the Prime Minister, and given what our understanding of geopolitics is at this point in time, then we say there should have been a red line drawn and there should be no military agreements of this nature.
Mr. Abdullah, as we're coming to the conclusion of this conversation, as you would have mentioned, that there are suggestions that former Prime Minister Patrick Manning, please excuse me, first ratified this agreement in 2007 due to the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting with the Summit of the Americas in 2009. That being said, in this particular instance, how much of this is a move on the part of Trinidad and Tobago to appease the concerns of the United States as Trinidad and Tobago continues to pursue dragon gas from Venezuela? Is this perhaps a concession on the part of Trinidad and Tobago in trying to secure our energy future? Further to that, what message does it send to our neighbors in CARICOM as well as Southern and Central America?
Right, that's a major issue. I'm glad you raised it, Keaton. That could be a driving factor. I don't know. The Prime Minister said that the United States is our friend, as is Venezuela. So maybe that is a implicit suggestion that there was a quid pro quo in this regard. I don't know. But, that's one of the problems because quid pro quos can cut more than one way. And you're right, because, and this is why I'm concerned about the geopolitics and the messages I send. You see, the U.S. Southern Command over the last 5-6 years in particular has not simply been a military command. In other words, that is the person who commands the U.S. military troops in this region, right? Including the operations of military bases and so on. But the U.S. Southern Command leaders have become very political. If you remember the previous Southcom commander, a woman, I don't remember her name now, was very active. She went to Guyana. She made statements in Guyana about Venezuela and so on, and protecting Guyana's right to the Essequibo, which really are not statements from a military person. Those are statements, at least not a military commander. It might be the statement of the Secretary of Defense or the Secretary of State or the Vice President or somebody like that. So this U.S. South Command has become very political, and that raises concerns both for us in Trinidad and Tobago. It also sends a message on to Venezuela, who has had to deal with the U.S. Southern Command with respect to Guyana. Because remember, there were activities in Guyana with U.S. troop personnel and Guyanese Defense Force personnel and so on. So Venezuela must be concerned. CARICOM must be concerned. Now, if, for example, CARICOM as a whole discussed this matter and said, listen, we as CARICOM need to sign certain kinds of agreements with the United States with respect to military presence and collaboration, that perhaps could have been better done at the level of CARICOM than at the level of Trinidad and Tobago. But it certainly doesn't send the right signal, and it's particularly concerning given U.S. Southern Command, Southcom's very highly political role in this region, not just military, but political, and also the incoming U.S. administration, which has extreme right-wingers like Marco Rubio, who's going to be Secretary of State, who is very anti-Cuba, very anti-Venezuela, very anti-Nicaragua, and therefore we are going to be in for a rough ride. So to sign this at this point in time is problematic. And there are other persons who Trump has chosen as in national security and other positions who come from that very far right, neocons, they call them, neoconservative wing of the Republican Party. So this is not a good signal for us and a good time for us, and that is why we think there should have been no signing.
I will say, for want of a better way of expressing it, fun times ahead. If you are an avid individual who focuses a lot on international relations, I think, as you mentioned, from January, we would have a new president sitting in the White House for the United States of America. And of course, the decisions on their part and the diplomatic policies on their part. Well, in terms of analysis, very fun times ahead. Mr. Abdullah, thank you very much
for
joining
academics
us.
and commentators.
Just for academics and commentators.
But for those of us who are very concerned about these matters, it's not going to be fun time at all. But have a very good Christmas. I see, Keaton, you have your Christmas decorations up behind you. So wishing you and your family and all of those tuned into WESN and the WESN family a very peaceful and happy Christmas.
Appreciate that, Mr. Abdullah, and of course, on behalf of the WSN family, thank you always for your contribution to AM Prime and the discussion, of course. And all the very best to you and your family during this festive period and heading into a new year. May it be a good one. May it be a good one.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. David Abdullah joining us on the program this morning, speaking about SOFA, the Status of Forces Agreement that was renewed, one can argue, from January 1st, 2025, signed by Minister of National Security Fitzgerald Hines last week. Of course, there are concerns in respect to the agreement, but the Prime Minister has sought to try and refute any claims that this can lead to any sort of direct military intervention. Of course, a part of the agreement indicates that Trinidad and Tobago is to give its written approval via diplomatic channels. But in the context of international relations and global studies, quite interesting the move on the part of Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm wondering whether or not this has anything to do with the Dragon gas field and whether or not this, of course, is a concession on the part of Trinidad and Tobago as it seeks to extract the resources that are available. Of course, relations with Venezuela are necessary, but Trinidad and Tobago, as the Prime Minister pointed out, we've always been a friend of Venezuela. We've always been a friend of the United States. We are an independent nation that is free to make decisions on our diplomatic and foreign policy. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a break on the program. There's still quite a bit to discuss this morning, so stay with us. We'll be right back.
Having trouble Christmas shopping? Check out the Kids Shop today. For all your officially licensed kid character merchandise, we carry characters such as Disney Princess, Frozen, Spider-Man, Paw Patrol, Sonic, My Little Pony, and much more. Call or visit us on Facebook or Instagram. Nationwide delivery available. The Kids Shop, for all your licensed kids character merchandise.
Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience. Give us a call at 235-5479 for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Simon's Musical Supplies Limited. We are the specialist in new and used musical instruments, carrying top brands like Yamaha, Pearl River pianos, Meinl and Sabian cymbals, Remo and Evans drumheads and Fender guitars, just to name a few. Also a wide assortment of music books, pan and accessories. At Simon's, we service what we sell. Trust the leader. Call us now at 625-6412 or visit us at 20 Board Street, Port of Spain.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust. Prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Here's your chance to win a bicycle, a ride-on, or a hoverboard. Shop at dbesttoys.com and spend $300 or more to win big.
We've got Bobby,
Hot Wheels, Gel Blasters, Ride-ons,
Leapfrog,
Nerf, bicycles and tricycles.
Greco, and Wonder Baby.
Visit us in store at Forces Flagship, McLean, Moubuton, Port of Spain,
Eastgate Smart, and M6 Plaza, Endeavour.
Merry Christmas, everyone!
Welcome back to AM Prime, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being with us this morning. Recently, concerns by the Private Pharmacy Retail Business Association President Glenwyn Suchert about import permits were being granted to certain people to bring in medication, indicating also that one company had 75% of the pharmaceuticals in this country, control over 75% of the pharmaceuticals that are currently available in this country. Well, this triggered an investigation on the part of the Fair Trading Commission, which indicated that they will be examining the competition and regulatory practices in the pharmaceutical sector that have been recently discussed in the public domain. This is not something that is necessarily unfamiliar to us here at EM Prime, because in previous discussions with the former president of the Trinidad and Tobago Pharmacy Board, Andrew Rahman, he indicated that there were already issues or instances where it was very difficult for pharmacists and even doctors to acquire certain medications because of a monopoly that exists on the market. But let's get into this conversation this morning once more as I welcome to the program Mr. Rahman. Good morning, sir, and welcome to AM Prime.
Yes, morning, and morning to all your viewers and listeners.
Well, Mr. Rahman, as I mentioned, this is not an issue that is unfamiliar, but to the best of your knowledge, given your experience from the position you've previously held, is this something that has been happening over a number of years, or is this only recent from post-COVID-19, the pandemic, where one pharmaceutical company in particular has gained extensive control over the sector?
Yes, well, it has been going on for quite a number of years. I mean, it has been exacerbated recently with the acquisition of the largest retail company acquiring the other largest retail company. And they are also the owners of the largest wholesale company. I don't have a percentage. I'm hoping that the investigations by the Fair Trading Commission give us the facts. So I wouldn't see the need to speculate, but I am thinking it might be approaching 60 to 70%. But we leave that for the people with the wherewithal and the resources to tell us, arrive at a figure as to their presence in the market.
Mr. Rahman, could you indicate how many pharmaceutical distribution companies exist in Trinidad and Tobago? Do you have that figure at the top of your head?
Not exactly, but more than the number that exists, or the amount that exists, it is the company that has the control of the most items for wholesale. And by standalone, they were already, I think, the largest. But as we have been indicating, they have been acquiring and acquiring and acquiring. Even of the islands where persons might have been able to get some relief, you know?
Why is this a major concern, though, that this monopoly exists? How is this actually affecting in any negative way the pharmaceutical sector?
We are seeing an increase in the number of items that are not available. We have a serious problem in Trinidad now with psychotic medication. I have to examine it a little closely, but I think, for instance, they were the agents for all of them. And these are things that prevent persons. I am thinking of about 4 to 5 psychotic medications. It's not much in Trinidad. And it is for persons who would tip over to the other side of sanity and very likely harm people. And for whatever reason that the people we are alleging have a monopoly are not getting or not bringing the items. So that is a good example of a concern, that if it becomes uneconomic for them to bring it in, and therefore stop bringing it in, if that is the reason, then other persons have been having great difficulty in being able to bring in those items for the citizens that really, really need it not to trip off. So I don't want to name, but I am thinking of 4 of the items at this point that are not available in Trinidad, and people are at severe risk of as we say, going mad, for not to be politically correct, So that's just a mere example.
Yeah.
But it is well accepted. They haven't had a Fair Trade Commission seeing what happens internationally with Google and their monopoly and the amount of antitrust money that they have to pay. The effects of a monopoly are well accepted, so much so that even our government has recognized the need to have a Fair Trading Commission, and I suspect also, if they're not done already, preparing antitrust laws and anti-competition laws. So it is a plethora of effects that can happen, and they do not want it in a sector, anything related to health, and in this case, more specifically, pharmaceuticals.
Mr. Rahman, you said for what is reason, and then you also mentioned that it can be uneconomical for the company. Is that something that has been accepted, or something that has been explained, that certain drugs may be withheld simply because financially or in business sense it is not viable for the company to be bringing it in, so therefore we're just deciding no longer to be the distributors of such?
Well, I don't think they have ever given a reason. I have suggested that could be a reason. There are times that the patents on the medication expire, and they may foresee that other companies will start producing it at a much lower rate. But when the time comes to import, whether it is other wholesalers with the ability to get the item, or it is that a generic is produced, there becomes a problem. A problem starts to rear its head at the point of importation, that the persons who are able to bring it into Trinidad are not given permission to bring it in. Now, the minister and I think the ministry would have flagged the issue of being guaranteed of the quality and the safety of those meds. But, I mean, if it is not available, there should be some system where the ministry hastens to assess the medication, and once they find it to be a safe drug, that they allow it to be imported. But the approach that is taken is that we could only have verified the safety from the original company. We can't verify its safety from whoever else is importing it, and they seize it at customs. Instead of finding a expedient way to test it and say, okay, we let in this batch, we let in this other batch, we let in this other drug, and so on. So I am just a little concerned in the circumstances that very likely the monopoly created when people in the industry find a way to import it, to source it and import it. It is simply seized, and that is the end of the story, rather than assess the medication scientifically and allow it in so that the citizens can get their medication that would prevent them from tipping over to the other side of sanity.
Is that also a major problem when we speak about pharmaceuticals and transmedical? Is there an influx of generic medication that is also cause for concern?
Well, yes. To the second part, there is an influx, has been for a long time, of generic medication, but they are all generally assessed by the ministry. Well, I'm not say assessed, approved, because the assessment is another issue that we have, and we are not aware of any scientific methods of assessment in the lab for the items, even that the ministry approves, because of the capabilities of the lab. And we used to send things to Jamaica and Miami to be assessed. And I think that facility has, I don't know if it was stopped or was no longer available, But if it is no longer available, we can find other facilities. So we don't have much concern. Yes, there's a proliferation of generic medication and just giving the citizenry a lot of relief financially. But we just want to be sure that the medication is useful and is effective. And I wouldn't mind the ministry outlining its method of scientifically doing so. There is a new drug advisory committee that advises the minister that would sit on the approval of these items. And but I am not aware of them being actually sent for testing to prove that what the documentation says about the product can be borne out scientifically.
To the best of your knowledge, do we have those testing facilities available in Trinidad?
But we do have a Ministry of Health lab that has some capacity to test. There are always problems with that lab with regard to industrial relations things and where they are located and their site of work and so on. But our knowledge of it was that the testing capacity was limited. Hence the reason why, as I said, Miami and Jamaica has been used traditionally. But I have not heard them being used for years and years and years. And I mean, I don't know what the ministry will raise it up to the light and see how it looks, because we are not aware of any scientific testing of the pharmaceuticals that are approved. Documents are reviewed. A large, in my mind, even too large a plethora of documents are reviewed, which delays the time for actual registration. And we feel that the testing could be done much more effectively to get all the information that you need to approve the drug.
Mr. Rahman, let's go back to a point you were making earlier in respect to pharmacists and even doctors trying to import these medications on their own. What are the difficulties associated with that? Are they even allowed to?
Well, you usually have to get an import permit for many items. But there's a part in the Food and Drug Act that talks about the fact that once the drug is registered, it can be imported. So what those persons are generally importing are drugs that have been already registered, which are drugs that can be imported. But there's no clear facility, or there isn't any facility for them to be able to submit the drug for testing. And sometimes, or most times, they are required to go through the entire gambit of getting the generic registered when the drug is already registered. So I can acknowledge an issue of safety with every person bringing it in. And I'm saying that we have to solve the problem at that juncture by taking the drug that is imported, testing it as efficiently as can be done, even utilizing foreign labs if we have to. Although Monto or UE has been suggested that they have the capabilities there, but they were never used or they were never approached to do it. So the university has been saying that they can test. I do not know if they can test everything. So I still plug away at the point that I will concede that safety can be a concern. So take the measures to eliminate that risk, which is the drug is not available in Trinidad. There are some drugs that we are hearing for surgery that we had two companies, much smaller companies, bringing in the targeted hospital medication that hospitals can get, including government hospitals. And I think one company closed down recently for lack of ability to be able to get the drugs into Trinidad. And the other is struggling. And these are drugs that are for safety and anesthetics and a whole plethora of uses in the government systems. And to me, it seems more prudent to take the drugs that were imported and test it. And once it is from the same batch and the same lot and so on, approve the importation for the relief of citizens.
Let me just clarify something, Mr. Rahman. Is it the actual drug, as in the actual substance itself, or is the issue the brand? Is it that there are certain brands that are approved, or is it the actual compound that make up the drug?
Well, that's generally a brand is approved. But the law went on to say the drug in the brand, that once a drug is registered, it can be imported. So the initial importation of drug A might come under the brand B. And the two, in my mind, A and B, that brand B is approved for importation. When the drug now A is imported by that drug name or another brand name, C or D or E, I think it is treated as though that is not a brand that has been approved. The problem is that the law refers to the drug that has been approved. So even though the law says drug, there's a problem, they are seized. And I am admitting that for safety reasons, they should be held in Bonn or wherever and tested in as efficient a manner as possible using government resources.
Have these concerns been raised with the Minister of Health? And if so, how has he responded?
Well, there's a committee now that is dealing with it. In my time, in my 20 years, we have raised it mainly with the department responsible, which is the Chemistry, Food and Drug Department. I would have had some discussions with the minister also, preliminary, and many ministers, not this because I've been president for 20 years. So both sides of the fence, many other ministers. But in terms of taking the drug and testing it to get it to the market for the citizens to get it, there has been no success on that front.
Therefore, I'm assuming that you welcome this on the part of the Fair Trade Commission as it tries to examine the practices. But the thing is, Mr. Rahman, it seems that this is long overdue.
Yes, and it is something that, I started being president in the year 2000. It's something I would have raised at that time, and the monopoly was not that bad. But, or the trading was not unfair, as unfair at that time. But as it developed, we upped the ante to a significant extent. And we have not seen much movement. Now, to be fair to the Fair Trading Commission, I remember going to something maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I can't remember, it's so long. So the issue was raised in that forum also. I was invited to some, I forgot the actual details of what it was about, but it was linked to that. So we need to get moving on the ability to get drugs that are scarce, because it is easy in this day and age for persons to get the items abroad. The difficulty is when it lands here. And I could concede that maybe it should be held, but it shouldn't be held for destruction or held to remain until expiry and the citizens don't get it. It should be held to test them immediately so that they can come onto the market when these monopolies, for whatever reason, stop importing the drug that citizens rely on so dearly.
Well, the Fair Trade Commission has acknowledged some of the issues of the pharmaceutical sector, but they've also indicated that such issues fall outside its direct purview. So therefore, it may not be able to examine all the concerns in relation to the current monopoly within the pharmaceutical sector. If that be the case, is there a need to once more return to the Minister of Health for some sort of intervention or at least guidelines in respect to policy to try and alleviate the situation, especially noting the fact that we have a shortage of critical drugs that are very critical in treating various diseases?
And it doesn't, well, to answer that question, I am hopeful that the Fair Trade Commission goes as far as they can go, because however far they reach, it will assist in bolstering our position on the things that they confirm and help us just to add to it to go forward to the Ministry of Health. But I mean, it will be remiss of me also not to mention the issue of there's other pharmaceuticals that are available in the private sector. They are on the formulary, and there are certain times in the public health, and there are certain cycles and times in the year. And I am getting more and more, I mean, I'm not even the president now, and I'm getting the complaints of persons not being able to access medication, which I would say in many instances is quite unaffordable in the private sector, that they can't get it in the public sector. And I mean, these are for non-NCDs and so on, and some chronic ailments in Trinidad. And sometimes things are unavailable in CDAP also for the chronic ailments. So it is also a little plug here I'm making for the citizens who are able to afford, that they can get the medication either through the CDAP system or through the public health system in a more consistent way. So these are not, this is the next issue of shortage that is being created. Not shortage, but inability of patients to get their medication in the public sector on an ongoing basis at different times, different types of medication. And they can't get it, they can't afford it in the private sector. So I mean, the effect of not getting the medication would cost the government so much more money to hospitalize, amputate, send in ICU, treat stroke, and some of the medication are obtained or are procured at a particularly cheap price because of no taxes and people willing to take cuts in their profit line and so on. So I want to make a plug for those citizens in Trinidad that can't purchase their medication. And it is penny wise and pound foolish to not get the medication in the public sector that is already on the formulary, not make sure that there's a supply, because the effects of high insulin levels and high sugar in the blood, high blood pressure, epilepsy, and all those things that are treated with medication in the government sector may cost 1,000 times the amount of money that the medication costs. Because those people who can't pay for the medication in the private sector can't go to private hospitals when they get ill effects, deleterious effects of cheaper medication that they can't get in the hospital. They have to end up in the same public sector.
Therefore, Mr. Rahman, as we conclude this morning's discussion, what you have said directly contradicts the Minister's of Health position, where he has indicated on previous occasions that there is no shortage of drugs available through the CDAP program. The CDAP program, my apologies. This of what you're presenting this morning is quite the opposite of what he has indicated previously.
So I'm not saying it is all the medication all the time, but I think I'm on record in the past as saying that it is causing the pharmacists working in the private sector on those CDAP things to be abused. because they are told by officials that the meds are available. And when persons come, and we have to tell them, we don't have, we just don't have. They usually are very abusive because of the utterances that the medication is available. So I am saying it is the scarcity, and I'm not only flagging CDAP, I'm flagging the public sector, where, I mean, any independent investigation would show what is unavailable today and for the next month or two. And then in a month or two, if they get that, another set would go missing. Well, go unavailable. So I don't necessarily want to contradict him, but I'm saying the abuse there that the pharmacists have to endure when they hear it being said that medication is available, and then when they go to the pharmacies to get their CDAP, they are told if they have 5 things, maybe 1 might be unavailable, maybe 2 might be unavailable, but some are usually unavailable, and equally in the private, equally in the public sector, and we know of it in the private pharmacies because patients who don't come to the private pharmacies usually have to flock to the pharmacies, and the majority of them have to just turn back with all the medication because of the cost of it. They are just unable to afford. So we have, I am saying that those are issues of evidence that show that on an ongoing time, I don't want to say to be prevalent, but there's always some group of medications or types of medications that are not available in the public sector at different times, and in CDAP at different times, in different cycles, and so on. And, I mean, you might talk to members of the public and they might complain about these pharmacists hoarding. There's no reason for us to keep it. We don't purchase the medication. We get it from the government, and we get a fee for dispensing it. So it might have to be an investigative work on the press side to confirm that things are periodically unavailable in CDAP and periodically unavailable in the public sector, where the patients who need it can't afford to come and pay in the pharmacy side. And if that is so, the cost to the government when they have to end up as a patient in the hospital because they couldn't get their medication is, I think, thousandfold in terms of the amount of money it would take to keep them as a patient, as opposed to supply the medication, ensuring that the medication is always there, always there, always there for their obtaining and use.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mr. Rahman, I want to thank you for joining us on the program this morning and for shedding more light on this. So we do not know when this investigation on the part of the Fair Trading Commission will be enacted, and we don't know when it will be concluded. But we do hope that, as you mentioned, they can take it to the furthest possible extent that falls under their jurisdiction. And of course, when that time happens, we await the results of such. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Rahman, on the program. All the very best to you.
And thanks for having me. Okay.
Take care, sir. All the very best. Bye-bye. Ladies and gentlemen, I have, well, Mr. Rahman did speak to it as he was coming to the end of his contribution. I have spoken to members of the public in relation to getting their medication by the CDAP program. And unfortunately, it has been extremely difficult in doing so. I've been told on a number of occasions from different individuals that prescriptions that they receive from doctors in the public healthcare system. So if they go to a public healthcare facility and they receive a prescription for drugs they need, it's not even available at the dispensary at the said hospital. And that in itself has question marks. But on the part of the Fair Trading Commission, we do hope that this investigation happens soon. And as Mr. Rahman said, maybe there's also a need for us as journalists to do some investigation to try and ascertain the extent of which this issue is and to what extent is there a shortage of drugs available via the CDAP program. But let's take a break on the program, ladies and gentlemen, a quick break. When we return, we'll wrap things up for this morning's edition of AM Prime. Stay with us.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
My name is Dr. Stephen Carroll, the CEO at Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist, and we are committed to making good private health care affordable.
For all your medical needs, including dental, radiology, laparoscopy, behavioral and mental health, along with many other services, contact us for more information at 235-5479.
Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Here's your chance to win a bicycle, a ride-on, or a hoverboard. Shop at dbesttoys.com and spend $300 or more to win big.
We've got Bobby,
Hot Wheels, Gel Blasters, Ride-Ons,
Leapfrog,
Nerf, Bicycles and Tricycles.
Greco, and Wonder Baby.
Visit us in store at Forces flagship McLean, Moubuchon Port of Spain,
Eastgate Smart and M6 Plaza Endeavour.
Merry Christmas, everyone!
Having trouble Christmas shopping? Check out the Kids Shop today. For all your officially licensed kid character merchandise, we carry characters such as Disney Princess, Frozen, Spider-Man, Paw Patrol, Sonic, My Little Pony, and much more. Call or visit us on Facebook or Instagram. Nationwide delivery available. The Kids Shop, for all your licensed kids character merchandise.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Simon's Musical Supplies Limited. We are the specialist in new and used musical instruments, carrying top brands like Yamaha, Pearl River pianos, vinyl and Sabian cymbals, Remo and Evans drumheads and Fender guitars, just to name a few. Also a wide assortment of music books, pan and accessories. At Simon's, we service what we sell. Trust the leader. Call us now at 625-6412 or visit us at 20 Board Street, Port of Spain.
This holiday season, bring the magic of Christmas home with WESN's Joy of Christmas. Relive timeless classics, from the laughter to the heartwarming moments that make the season unforgettable.
Hey, like the lamp, not the rat, like the lamp, not the rat!
Santa's coming to town! Oh my God!
Woo!
Oh, poor baby.
Experience the joy of WESN special productions, crafted to bring you new stories and cherished memories. This year, let WESN bring the joy of Christmas to your home.
Merry Christmas, Charlie Brown!
Catch the spirit, catch the joy.
Anchors away.
May the force be with you.
Only on WESN, your content capital.
¿Qué camino cogería si cogióle las desgracias? ¿Qué golpe no llevaría? ¿Qué golpe no llevaría? Una mujer me llamaba, pero yo no le...
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are preparing to conclude this morning's AM Prime, and I want to thank all my guests for joining me on the program, starting with Mr. David Abdullah, as he spoke to us about the SOFA agreements between the United States and Trinidad, raising concerns in respect to our sovereignty and the possible message it sends to our neighbors in CARICOM, Southern and Central America. So we thank him for that, and of course, our discussion that we just had with the former president of the Pharmaceutical Board of Trinidad, Mr. Andrew Rahman, in respect to the Fair Trade Commission, their investigation into the regulatory and trading practices within the pharmaceutical sector. So, of course, as I said, we're not too sure when that investigation will begin and when it concludes, but we certainly await further information. Well, as we come to the close of this morning's discussion, I want to thank you for joining us on the program, viewer. Without you, AM Prime would not be possible, but also to my team in Ryan Gomezberg and Mildwood, who really are the backbone live of the early morning cast on WESN. So we thank them for their presence and for always doing their best to ensure that we go live and we have a smooth sailing when it comes to AM Prime. To my producer, Naomi McNish, thank you very much for your continued assistance and support. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Keith Shaw. Remind you, today is a good day to have a good day. And in doing so, as we conclude this morning's edition of AM Prime, we leave you with this report of the official opening of the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, France, that took place 2 Fridays ago. So take a look at this report, ladies and gentlemen. We leave you with. We'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.
Leaders of some 50 nations are in France today, celebrating a moment that some thought would never come. The reopening of the landmark Cathedral Notre Dame. Seth Doan is in Paris.
Those indelible images of a burning cathedral against the Parisian skyline were also burned into our memory. But the heartbreak of that day, when seemingly all was lost, has given way to a resurrection of sorts. With a ritual knocking, the Archbishop of Paris marked the reopening of Notre Dame Saturday night, just 5 years after the fire, unveiling a restoration perhaps as extraordinary as was the destruction itself. At the gleaming Gothic monument, French President Emmanuel Macron hosted world leaders and luminaries, among them Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, Britain's Prince William, and President-elect Donald Trump. Macron triumphant after the successful completion of his audacious 5-year renovation deadline. Last summer, we were granted rare access to the cathedral.
They've been removing the scaffolding, but we're still about 100 feet up in the air.
It's a national challenge.
Philip Jost was in charge of meeting Macron's deadline.
The schedule, the time, 5 years, but we needed that.
Why?
To mobilize. It's such a challenge, you see, and challenge unified people. We do here things we have never done since 150 years, perhaps. Such spire to build such big roofs with oak and lead. We were not sure workers would be able.
You know now, but it was a question.
It was a question.
To rebuild, they first had to stabilize the 12th century monument, encasing it in scaffolding. Then 21st century tools, drones and computer animations were used to study and guide the reconstruction.
This they're not calling a sprinkler, but a mister. It's the first of its kind in a cathedral in France. If there were to be a fire in the future, a mist
would come out here and help fight that fire. It was among the changes meant to prevent a repeat of the 2019 fire, which investigators believe was an accident.
They put massive metal trusses here to divide the roof into 3 sections, making it less likely for a fire to spread.
Amid such a grand reconstruction, Thomas Lefebvre was among the army of artisans working on the smallest of scales, cutting these decorative lead details for the roof.
This is done on site at the last minute.
Yes, all the piece here, it's different, so we have to do handmade.
Everything by hand?
Yeah.
Do you forget where you are? Way up in the air.
No, yes, we forget this.
Around 2,000 people helped rebuild. A foundry in Normandy retuned the bells, which rang out again this weekend. And some scoured forests for centuries-old oak.
They had to find 1,000 pieces of this French oak to rebuild the spire. We're really at the heart of it now. They call this a masterpiece of French carpentry.
Help came from across France. At Guédelon in the Burgundy region, they're building a castle from scratch. And a handful of workers applied skills sharpened here to the effort in Paris.
And the weekend...
Marilyn Martin is co-founder of this experiment-turned-tourist attraction.
French carpenters who want to do the job in Notre Dame call us and come to learn how to cut the wood as the medieval techniques, with the medieval tools.
And at the Mobilier National in Paris, paintings once covered in soot were on display before being returned to Notre Dame. Oriane Levitte was curator.
It was a disaster, the fire, but in some way there is a luck because we have the funds to restore 22 canvas.
Luck, you call it?
In part luck, because it was horrible for all of us, but we could restore all this painting because of the fire and because there is a lot of money to do the restoration.
Nearly $900 million was raised from 150 countries, including around 40,000 donors in the U.S.
You can see the before and after so clearly.
Yes, one of the aims of the exhibition is to show to people the work of restoration on the canvas. And then, after restoration, you have like the revelation of colors.
It is so much more colorful.
The newly cleaned interior of the cathedral is now markedly lighter. In this side chapel, a restorer was retouching where centuries of grime had been removed.
Looking around, it's incredible. There are these bright colors that have been revealed just from cleaning.
It's true, restorer Charlotte Falouza told us. Everything was black, and by doing a simple cleaning, we could already find the original colors.
Here you will have...
When we first saw the renovation underway, retired French Army General Jean-Louis Jojolin was in charge. He pointed out the cavity where the spire once was.
This is the heart of the drama, here.
The last time we were here, we were standing just on the other side there, looking down into a gaping hole. That hole was where the spire now stands. It's been completely rebuilt.
The general died in a hiking accident last year. Philippe Jost had been his number 2.
It was a big shock for all of us, but we knew that it was what he would have wanted for us, to continue the work.
How important was it to respect the original, to try to rebuild as close to the way it was as possible?
It's what we owe to this monument.
You owe it to the monument?
You owe it
to make it as original as possible?
Exactly.
Jost calls this a monument with a soul. As it opens to the public, this painstaking renovation proves a testament to human innovation, past and present. France's president praised the firefighters, engineers, and craftspeople as he declared the bells of Notre Dame are ringing again.
Simons Musical Supplies Limited. We are the specialist in new and used musical instruments, carrying top brands like Yamaha, Pearl River pianos, vinyl and Sabian cymbals, Remo and Evans drumheads and Fender guitars, just to name a few. Also a wide assortment of music books, pan and accessories. At Simons, we service what we sell. Trust the leader. Call us now at 625-6412 or visit us at 20 Board Street, Port of Spain.